All right, so real quick, guys, it is week 4 of the Acne Beautiful journey. We've made it to week 4. You've had plenty of time to consider what it's going to be like to remove dairy in order to prepare yourself. Now it's time to do it. So you're going to have a whole week without dairy, and then you're going to have a whole nother week without dairy. So if you're doing this right for your skin, you're going to go 2 weeks before you do any sort of evaluation of your skin in order to see how it is working for you. You go ahead and you take out dairy within the following 24 hours when you are ready. Okay? So I'm going to keep in mind that we're keeping dairy out for 2 weeks. We're going to check in 7 days, and we're going to check in again in 14 days. So I want to give you guys a little rundown of the dairy acne inflammation connection, which you can refer to my hormone videos for a more in-depth explanation. But to give you the gist of it, kind of goes like this. So when you think about dairy, and I am mostly referring to conventional dairy right now, however, let's go ahead and put grass-fed dairy in this category for the moment as well, but there will absolutely be some important distinctions between conventional dairy and grass-fed dairy. Okay, but when you think about dairy, and when you think about milk, because that's the big form of dairy that we're kind of talking about here. When you think about milk, what is its main purpose? To feed a baby animal or human, right? And to help basically provide them with a large dose of nutrients in a very quick and efficient way to help them grow rapidly, nice and big and strong. Especially cows. So cows are, they're gonna grow faster than a human baby. So we really want to consider the fact that we are consuming milk designed for a baby calf to grow big and strong and fast. So what are some of the essential ingredients to grow, right? Think about a human now. Think about a human who is an adolescent going through puberty. What do we have a surge of during that time of our lives? Hormones, correct? Doesn't matter if you're male or you're female, we all have a surge of hormones. Specifically, we have a very big surge of male hormones, whether we're male or female. We all have those hormones, and we definitely have a surge of the male hormones during that time of our life as well. So think about like a hormone that is linked to the growth of muscles, right? Testosterone, right? That goes for males and females. So if you're a female and you do put on muscle easily when you do work out, maybe you have a little bit more testosterone than your female friend who doesn't put on muscle quite as easily. That's not to say that's straight across the board no matter what, but we're just taking like a snapshot picture of hormones, right, and what they do. Now there's another hormone. It's called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor hormone. Now again, this is present in humans, and it's present in larger quantities when we're teenagers to promote what? Growth, right? So we're having growth of our bodies, and that includes not just getting taller and stronger, but we have a sexual reproduction development occurring at that time as well. Now, IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor, is also present in milk. So we have to keep that in mind. It's really, really important when we're thinking about milk and the connection to acne. So the primary driving forces behind acne when it comes to dairy are IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor hormone, and some of the male-driven hormones like testosterone and DHT. There's another element to dairy. So dairy not only has carbohydrates, it also has proteins. The carbohydrates in milk stimulate insulin. And the stimulation of insulin can also lead to an overabundance of the male-driven hormones. That basically leads to an overactivity of these androgenic or male-driven hormones in our skin. They tend to have, we tend to have receptor sites for some of these male hormones that we call androgens on a whole, and it produces a little bit more androgenic activity in the skin. That in and of itself tends to be linked to acne. Now, what's happening behind the scenes to take the male hormones and the, outward formation of a pimple is something in and of itself. One important area of the skin is known as the sebaceous glands. These are just our oil glands. They produce oil for our skin. Some people are naturally more oily than others. Many people during those teenage years might have oilier skin than they have had in the past or will have later in life. Now, if you are somebody who tends to have oily skin in general, well, then you can pretty much bet that you're going to have even oilier skin during your teenage years as well. So we need to take all of that into account. You need to think about how oily your skin is to begin with. You need to think about what stage you are in your life when you're removing dairy as well, or thinking about consuming dairy as well. But just to kind of give you a quick breakdown of the skin and what happens is that, so many people who do suffer from acne are not very efficient at naturally sloughing off the accumulation of dead skin cells. And again, this kind of comes back to that androgenic activity. And if you are predisposed to having maybe a little bit more of the male-driven hormones than somebody else, and you're consuming dairy and you're having an overstimulation of the receptors in your skin cells from the androgenic activity, well, you're kind of hitting yourself with a double-edged sword there. You're gonna have a harder time, number one, to begin with, of sloughing off those dead skin cells, but also as you're hitting it with the dairy and the hormones that are in the dairy, which are increasing that androgenic activity, you're more likely then to just have a quicker accumulation of dead skin cells because you're having an overproduction of oil as well related to the androgenic activity in the skin, and because they're not sloughing off effectively on their own, then what happens is you basically end up with that clogged pore, that so-called clogged pore. And when that happens, so think of in your mind, you're getting I think to think of it as like a pile up of dead skin cells that aren't going away as they should. They're just kind of hanging out there, getting thicker, like a big old pile up. Meanwhile, your sebaceous gland is still pumping out more oil. It's pumping out more oil, and that oil doesn't have anywhere to go because there are all of these dead skin cells accumulated on top, blocking that oil from coming out. Now you're going to have a little bit of inflammation start to be created because, for one thing, you're going to have an opportunistic bacteria called P. acnes bacteria. That's just the short version of the word, which is a bacteria that we all have on our skin. But can you guess? Yes, those with acne-prone skin or with active acne have more P. acnes bacteria than somebody else. Now that P. acnes bacteria is very opportunistic, and it wants to munch on all of those dead skin cells that haven't been naturally sloughed off. So it's all excited, it's having a feeding frenzy there, and as that's happening, so you've got overaccumulation of dead skin cells, you overproduction of oil, you have this gunky, thick ass layer that just won't leave, it just won't go, and P. acnes bacteria is like, woohoo, it's party time, runs over for a little feast, and your immune system kicks in at this point and says, there is an issue, and I need to send out the garbage collectors to clean up this mess. So as soon as your immune system activates its defense system, you end up with redness, inflammation, irritation, you end up with a pimple. That's kind of how that goes. Alright, so let's continue. Now that you know a little bit more about hormones and dairy and the structure of the skin, how it all works, you have a good enough picture to give you some of the motivation you might be looking for to help you get through the first few days off of dairy. Because the first few days are probably going to be the most challenging. Okay? Now, it might actually be day 7 that's the most challenging for you. It kind of depends on how much you consume dairy right now, at this point in your life. Now, we're not going to get into cheese and yogurt and all of that right now in regards to dairy, but we are going to remove that as well. And that kind of depends on the level of acne that you're dealing with. And I would highly recommend that you do remove yogurt and cheese right now as well, so that you can really get a clear picture of what's going on with your skin in relation to dairy on a whole. Let's quickly talk about some of the nutrients found in dairy and conventional versus pasture-raised grass-fed dairy. So this should probably go without saying at this point in our agricultural journey in the United States and in the world, but conventional dairy, part of the problem with that is that the animals are not fed their own natural diet. They're not allowed to ruminate and consume nutrient-rich grass to provide them with the nutrients that they need to in turn produce a healthy product for humans to consume. Also, what goes along with that is that because they are not consuming their natural diet, they're consuming grains like GMO corn and soybeans and other things of that nature. Canola. When that happens, the animals do not have the opportunity to produce enough omega-3, so they have an inverted omega-3 to omega-6 ratio when it comes to their meats and any other products that come from the animal, like their dairy, their butter, right? Things like that. The other thing that happens is that the animals tend to get sick because, again, they're not consuming a diet that is made for them. They're consuming foods that make them sick, quite literally, and they have to be given antibiotics in order to help keep them healthy enough, which is basically just keeping them from taking out the whole herd with their illnesses, and in turn we end up with those antibiotics as well in our food sources, and not to mention in our water sources, and not to mention the whole issue with the overuse of antibiotics that kind of just comes along with giving them to animals in abundance. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind. If you are somebody who consumes conventional dairy, you're also getting added hormones and added antibiotics, which nobody needs or nobody wants. On the other side of the spectrum, we do have our 100% grass-fed pasture-raised dairy, which is becoming more and more popular these days, thank goodness, and you can find it in pretty much almost any supermarket these days. Luckily, with a product like that, you're getting a nutrient-rich product. You're getting a product that does have the proper omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Omega-3 is full of anti-inflammatory benefits. Omega-6 is the exact opposite. You're ending up with a pro-inflammatory product when you have too much omega-6 in it. You're also going to get things like, added zinc and L-carnitine, and that just kind of comes with the whole consumption of the animal when you're thinking about the meat, not just the dairy. Okay, so we just want to kind of point that out there. Other nutrients that we get when we consume dairy are very obvious. Calcium, vitamin D, and those two do work together in a lot of ways, and some small amounts of vitamin A, but the main thing that we're looking to make sure that we replace when we're removing dairy is calcium and vitamin D. Now, if you're removing dairy for a short period of time, just to see how you do, you don't need to worry about this as much right now. If you end up removing dairy for the long haul, you are going to want to make sure that you replace nutrients like calcium and vitamin D in particular, so that you are getting those nutrients that you need from somewhere else, from other sources. Some of those sources can include cod liver oil, like fermented cod liver oil. That's going to help provide you with both vitamin D and vitamin A. They are naturally occurring in cod liver oil in varying amounts depending upon the fish. You're also going to get a nice dose of omega-3 from that. You're not going to get calcium. So you still need to make sure you're getting a high quality source of calcium, and you can do this in a number of ways. You can combine a high quality supplement, and I will talk about calcium supplements, but you can use a high quality calcium supplement, and some of those that I would look for would be basically a more bioavailable form of calcium, which can come from algae. It can just include all of the different cofactors that you need in order to absorb calcium, but that's kind of like a whole nother topic in and of itself, and I will talk about calcium on a whole one day as well. But just know that if you take dairy out for more than 2 weeks, right now we're just going to do 2 weeks, but if you do remove it for more than 2 weeks because you do notice that you're having a significant improvement in your skin by taking it out, then you will want to consider a high quality supplement that contains calcium. It can be a multi, and sometimes that's a great way to go. A good multivitamin that has calcium in it. All right. The other ways that you can get some additional calcium in your diet is to eat things like different forms of seafood, leafy greens, some nutrients like moringa, for example. There are a lot. So again, when I do calcium, I will talk more about foods that contain calcium as well. But just kind of, look out for what does contain calcium, and you're going to start to see that there are some options, and you just have to be a little bit more diligent about making sure that you're adding up everything throughout the day to get that calcium. Now, if you consume salmon, like salmon in a can with the bones in it, or sardines, anchovies with the bones in them, then you are also going to get some high quality bioavailable calcium from those foods. Okay. All right. The other benefit to consuming omega-3, so if you're going to have grass-fed dairy, this is just a little side note, if you do end up having grass-fed dairy down the road, which is going to be richer in omega-3 than omega-6, that is going to assist your body in maintaining healthy levels of inflammation, which is something we're shooting for, we're aiming for with our skin. You may experience some light withdrawal symptoms. This is basically because some of the chemicals, natural chemicals within dairy, and we can find this in cheese as well, follow some of the pathways in the brain that produce feelings of contentment and ease and joy and pleasure, right? So there is a little bit of a potential withdrawal effect that can happen when you are letting go or eliminating these things, and you can easily balance that out by doing other things that produce those good feeling chemicals in your body, like doing some yoga, some journaling, or whatever it is that is enjoyable to you that makes you feel good. Going for a run, going to work out, all of that kind of stuff is going to help produce those feel-good chemicals and lessen the experiences of withdrawal. Number 2, just don't have it in the house. Just don't have it in the house. Now, if you live with somebody who needs to have it, you can put it in a different container for one thing, so it's visually not as stimulating to you when you open the refrigerator. Things to look for as you go through this dairy elimination. So if you have itchy skin, rashy, itchy acne, little bumps, cystic acne, a lot of white heads, if you tend to experience bloating after consuming dairy, if you generally just have a lot of redness in your skin, as well. These are all things that you might experience a reduction in when eliminating dairy. So this is my little anecdotal story before we go. I had a client back in 2014. She was 15 years old, so she was a teenager. She had been experiencing what I would consider severe chronic acne since she was about 9 years old, and it had only been getting worse as she got older. She had been through the ringer with dermatologists. She had tried lots of different antibiotics internally and topicals, and they would help for short periods of time, but it wasn't the grand solution that she was looking for, right? She had tried acupuncture, she had tried herbalists, all sorts of different things, sort of hit and miss. And then she found Acne Beautiful, and I worked with her for about 6 months, and we did a lot of different things. But one of the biggest things that helped her skin in the initial stages was the removal of dairy. And she was really resistant and hesitant to do it, but she really did trust the relationship that her and I had developed together up until that point. So she was willing to go out on a limb and try something that made her feel scared and uncomfortable and felt like she was going to be missing something that she really enjoyed every day, which was dairy. So she did it. She really went for it. She took the dairy out, and after 1 week's time and after 2 weeks' time, she had a very significant reduction in redness and rashy itchiness. She didn't even realize that her skin was sort of rashy and itchy until the sensation had gone away. She didn't even realize that she had that sensation, that she was experiencing that sensation day in and day out until it was gone. And more often than not, that is kind of what happens, not just in the world of acne, but with anything. When we start to feel an improvement, we start to feel differently, see things differently. We didn't even realize what we were missing up until that point, because we become so used to living with and dealing with the afflictions as they are. The next thing that occurred after she removed the dairy for more than 2 weeks was she began to experience a significant reduction in the painful cystic acne around her jawline and the overall number of white pustule acne as well. What this did for her was it gave her a real significant leg up in her Acne Beautiful journey, because it gave her a platform to work off of where she wasn't experiencing as much redness and irritation, so her skin was generally easier to work with and touch and just live with on a day-to-day basis. Then that minor to moderate reduction in acne was just enough of an improvement for her to experience even bigger benefits and effects from all of the other things that we did and implemented as we went down the road. So it actually helps sort of like speed up that approach to the tipping point that she needed to get to, that was going to tip her over the edge to where everything was going to work more quickly and more easily to her advantage. And that's also why I speak so much to the energetic level of things, because when you have that consistently working on your side to your advantage, it really does help everything else work a little bit better and a little bit faster too. So that being said, I'm going to leave you guys now. I'm going to leave you guys today with your week 4 task, which is to remove dairy. Remove dairy from your life temporarily. We're starting with 1 week. We're going to 2 weeks. So just start now and start today. Get yourself prepared. If you're going to eliminate it starting tomorrow, then you know exactly what to do. You know what you're up against, and you can remind yourself all of the good things that you are doing for your skin by reflecting on the hormones, by reflecting on how your skin is now and where it is that you want to see your skin down the road. So remember that when you have a day, when you have a moment that feels challenging and you really want to reach for, something with dairy in it. And that actually reminds me, the last thing I'm going to say, this would be a really good time to avoid eating out. It's just going to make the removal of dairy easier, because you're not going to have to wonder, is there something with dairy in this? You're not going to have to ask. At this point, you don't even need to worry about dairy replacements. But obviously, they're really ubiquitous. So if you want to go for an almond milk or a coconut milk, just so that you have something else, then there you go. But you have all of the main tools that you need to work with right now to get you started on removing dairy. Trust me, it's not as hard as it may seem. And you guys are doing it at a good time. You're doing it at a time when collectively the consciousness has moved more towards alternative products than 10 years ago. It was a really almost taboo thing to do when I did it more than 10 years ago now. Okay, so I'm here for you guys. I'm with you guys. Any comments, concerns, questions you have, this is the place to do it, because I'm going to read them, I'm going to answer them, and I am 100% here for you. I want to see you have improvements in your skin, and this is just one of the many ways and steps that you can do it. So, you know, just remember who you are, and remember that it's not forever, and remember too that, you know what, if your skin's not affected by dairy, then there's a million other things that we can do, that we can try, and that's part of being on the Acne Beautiful program. It's part of exploring yourself, exploring your world, exploring your skin, and it's a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for being here with me today, and I will see you back for week 5 video, which is going to be an energetic check-in, because we're going to be coming to the end of our week 1 dairy elimination, and we're going to need it. We're going to need the support. So, bye for now.